guys, this is my first flip book. I have done a lot of trial and error to make this work. It's not perfection, but I did enjoy making it, and I love having the picture flips where you can change the heads and bodies. I don't know why that's so amusing to me, but I just love it. So I wanted to show you what I made and then make another one so you can see kind of my process. I'm not an expert by any means. The one thing I haven't completely solved is it does kind of sag when you lift it upright. I'm sure there's some secret to making that work perfectly, but I don't have it. So we'll do the best we can. So let me just show you here. I have the flip pages, and underneath it I have a bigger image. These are all vintage wedding photos. And I've done some aged metal looking edging. I did find that doing this all the way to the edge here caused the rest of my project to be even harder, so when I do it again I'm not going to go that far, or maybe I'll just do this edge. Because I went too far on the edge, I had to do kind of a weird binding, so the binding across the back goes all the way from one side to the other, but I had to put an inside binding to connect them. See if you can't. So I have the paper binding, but underneath that is a cloth one that's also glued to that cloth binding. Anyway, it made it way more complicated than it needed to be. So I've learned from my mistake. I'll just do a quick flip through here. You've seen kind of the flip pages in the front. And then I've put some tucks. I haven't filled all the tucks in this book yet, but I put a couple in to sort of show how they can be used. There's lots of room to add more pockets and things. I've done the tie for the binding on the inside so that I could put some beads in there. This is 2 signatures for this book. I have another tuck here. I love these vintage coasters, and you can usually find them for fairly cheap. I have a belly band with some tag. I just did some really basic additions in here. Another little belly band. This has a tuck on the top and just some lace decoration. And the back is very simple. I guess I have some. So, elaborate on the front, fairly boring on the back, but that's okay. I started off by finding an old hardcover book and taking the cardboard out of it to make the front and back. These are the perfect covers to use for something like this because they're already wrecked from a library taping the cover onto the book. So we're going to have to cover the covers. Anyway, we have our 2 covers. And I'm going to get a piece of paper to put underneath. I have a work surface, so when I get paint everywhere, it will not add to the mess that is my table. We're going to cover this with gesso. I have black Liquitex gesso. You could use clear gesso. I'm just saving myself an extra step by using black to begin with. I pick up a lot of brushes from the local Dollar Tree because I'm horrible at rinsing them on time, and with something like this where you don't need precise work, I don't feel guilty if I ruin them. All I'm doing is putting a fairly even light coat of gesso over the top because I'm going to be doing a lot of gluing and painting over it, and I need it to be able to stick to that surface. It's probably the most boring of all the steps, but if you don't do it, you'll end up regretting it because things will pop off and you have to redo things multiple times. If you don't have gesso, you can take paint and Elmer's glue and mix it together, put a little bit of baby powder in it or talcum powder, and it'll give you the same type of surface area when you're done. I've done that a few times when I've run out of white gesso, because I always keep clear gesso around. I use that the most because then I can adjust any color paint to be a gesso. So we're going to let this dry and come back with some jewelry type doodads, different texture things to glue down to build up that sort of age-jeweled appearance on the cover. You're going to need to gather some supplies. You need something to glue things down with. You can use a matte gel, you can use modeling paste, you can use Fabri-Tac or E6000, which is probably going to be your strongest one. It just depends on how fast you want it to dry, really. This will give you the most support, and the gels and pastes is somewhere in the middle. And then Fabri-Tac is going to be the lightest amount of bond, but you're going to put so many layers on it might not matter. I'm going to use Fabri-Tac today because it dries really quickly. If I was doing something that I really wanted to be able to take a beating, I'd use this E6000, but it does take a long time to dry. And I don't have the patience between layers, especially when I'm recording. You're also going to need some bits and bobs. So some old jewelry that you can break apart pieces. It can be where it's set up a little bit. A lot of times bracelets, if you take them apart, have some really cool pieces. You might need more of a modeling paste to stick those down. You can also use wooden cutouts. A lot of times you can find these at like the dollar stores. I also use beads to add texture. So I have some rock beads here, courtesy of my sister, who is always looking out for me. And I also have some smaller seed beads and even some bigger glitter to add texture. I also have chains, and you can use lace as well to add texture underneath. So we'll use a little bit of each so you can see the difference between, how each of them lays down. I'm going to do the edging on both sides instead of wrapping it around the way I did with the last one. So both of these are dry now. I'm going to start off by just laying out, actually before I put glue down, I think I'm going to lay out kind of an idea. I think I'm going to put some chains down both sides. And then I'm not looking for total symmetry, but it's nice if it can be somewhat similar in the design of it. So if I have some bigger things and then put little stuff in between, I can kind of create a design that will make sense next to each other. Let's put a little bit of each thing in here. I have these butterflies, and I think I have a couple different styles of butterfly, so we can mix it up a little bit. Let's have this one. I think I'm going to have to layer this up and maybe do lace underneath and then chain and then put some doodads on there. We could do a star. I don't think that's going to hold paint very well. It's got a shiny finish, and I don't want to sit and sand things off right now. We could use leaves from fake flowers. That could add a little bit of texture. I do have this little thing. And I don't know, I think I might hold off using this because it's got a lot of dangly to it, so I'm going to set it aside. Okay, so I kind of have an idea. I'm going to put those to the side. I always end up changing my mind 17 times, so no point in spending too much time on that. I'm going to get some lace that is just kind of bland because we're going to paint over it anyway, so it doesn't have to be something super fancy. I'm going to rip it so it doesn't have a nice neat texture to it. and then I'm going to put the chain over that. So keep in mind that we're painting over it, so it doesn't matter if they match. You don't have to worry about the color of it. You just want to make sure it lays down completely and is secure, so when you paint it, it stays where you want it to be. Might have to cut some of these little fringes off. And because there's so many layers to this, I don't really worry too much about how perfect the layers are, because there's gonna be so much more to it. You're gonna just build and build and build, so it can be imperfect. Now I'm gonna do the chains, and I like to put them in kind of messy, like spiralies. I don't want it to be perfectly symmetrical, so I'll put the glue down and try to follow my weird lines. Now you don't have to go to this level, but it is what I like to do, because this is going to be the background texture for everything else that you're putting down. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I might draw my whole spirally thing ahead of time. And it might seem like a bit too much glue, but like I said, we're building on top of it, so it gives you the ability to squish things down into it. If it dries a little bit clumpy, it won't matter, because there's all kinds of stuff that's going to be put on top. If you hate messes and hate touching things like glue, this might not be the project for you. Whew, now that's sticky. Okay, it looks really ugly, but we're just getting started, so don't panic. I'm gonna put a rounded one on each end just to try to bring them together, make them look like they're intentional. I might put the butterflies in that indent. I don't want it to be too matchy-matchy though, so I gotta think about this. Maybe I'll put him here, and then we have this. This can go over all of that. I am gonna have to use a little bit of modeling paste for these bigger ones because they do stick up quite a bit. Let's do our flat ones first. I'm gonna put the glue on the image I'm gluing down. I think maybe I'll put, maybe go this way. Because it's not going to show up the same way it looks right now because you are painting over it. So you kind of have to use your imagination when you're thinking about how it's going to look. There we go, that's better. Okay, so we're going to get some, I think I'm actually going to use the gel. My modeling paste is getting a little bit clumpy. I think I left it not fully shut. So this will be a better option. Okay. I usually use a palette knife, or you can use like a plastic knife for like when you're having a picnic lunch and don't want to do dishes. Get it nice and thick because it's gonna, you want it to attach where it's a little bit raised up. Now this will take a while to dry, so I'll have to take a break and come back. Because this stuff is like, almost like using Play-Doh to seal stuff down, but if you need it to be raised up, you really have to use something that can get into all those grooves. Notice I'm not getting that worried about how perfect it is on the edges, because I am going to just cover it with more stuff, so there's no point in being a perfectionist. Do I want her in there? Maybe I will put her in there. I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this angel. She's kind of cartoonish, but she's gonna be layered with a lot of stuff, so I think it will still be okay. I get bags of broken jewelry from my local secondhand store, all the stuff that they can't sell. So it's a wide variety of things that end up coming to me, and some of them sit there for a while because I can't imagine how I will use it. And this is one of those things that I've held on to forever because it just does have kind of a kid-ish look to it. Now I could sit and wait for that to dry, or I could do the next step, which is going to be putting stones down. And I think just for the sake of time, I'm going to put them down even though that stuff is still wet, and just be mindful that those things could shift. And I'm just going to use Fabri-Tac. When it all dries, it will all bind together, so it's not the end of the world. If you find yourself with a lot of junk on your hands, baby wipes are magic. They'll take off acrylic paint, they'll take off most goo. They don't really take off dried Fabri-Tac though, but most things come off with baby wipes. So I'm gonna use stones, and it doesn't matter what color they are because we're gonna paint over them anyway. And I'm looking to fill spaces, so I'm just going to add some glue here and there. And then pepper it with some stones. You can always shake off what ones don't stick later, so don't worry about if they fall somewhere you don't want them to go. They'll only stick to wherever you put glue down, so you're still okay if you drop a few. And I'm going to use smaller stones or beads to fill in between the bigger stones, so I'm not worried about if I leave gaps that way either. And it will look like a mess at first, but it will come together later, I promise. I think I may put a little stone where that heart is because I don't want it to look cheesy. And I may, well, with the smaller stones, I might fill in some of that space on the angel to make her look a little less cartoonish. Just cover it more. And we don't have to totally leave things open. If you want to cover, do a layer over the butterfly or add a little bit of rock over the butterfly, you can. It will look cool. You don't need to worry about whether the pattern is perfect anywhere. We're just adding texture. I'm going to get these corners really well and kind of fill in this space. Because this is raised up a little bit, so I want to make sure I have stones there to kind of hide that gap that's going to be there. Now remember, if it's not perfect, it's okay. You're going to do another layer over it anyway. Okay, we're going to do the other side. Now that the glue is dry, I'm going to create more texture by mixing glitter and either black gesso or black paint, and I'm basically creating like a grit paste with the paint, so I get to skip a step. I don't have to paint over it another time. So you mix it together really thoroughly and fill in all of the little gaps. We may have to do a couple of coats because it will be hard to fill in all of these holes. I've fast forwarded this clip a little bit because no one wants to sit and watch the redundant brushing of paint, especially when we get into doing 2 or 3 coats. Now that it's dried, we can look a little closer and see where the white is coming through and do a second layer. I'm using the same black paint, but I'm not worried about mixing the glitter in with it because we're trying to get into those little grooves and the texture's already there, so there's lots of little tiny spaces where you can see the white or the metal come through. It's kind of fiddly work, but it does really make a difference in the finished product. You may also find sparkles from the glitter popping through that you want to cover. I don't mind a little bit of shine from the glitter, but I don't want that to be the focus. So I also, if I see a really gaping hole with the stones, then I'll add some paint over them so it doesn't look too much like they're beads. If you usually use a paint palette, go for it. I've gotten lazy over the years where I don't want to have to clean a palette. I do have the sort of disposable type that you can get at a dollar store where you can just rip off the part or the top page after you're done using it. And I'll use that sometimes. Alright, so that second layer is done. Now we'll get this one. This one more, I missed a lot of the chain. So there's some metal that shows through on the chain. It is nice to be able to tip it and look, where you can't do that when the whole thing is wet. I'm putting another layer over the words that were on the angel, because I'm not a fan of that showing up. Hopefully that will be enough to cover it. If not, we'll put some stones over it or something later. Alright, now we wait another round for things to dry. Getting impatient yet? I've used some Fabri-Tac glue, and these, it's called glass glitter. It's a chunky kind of glitter to add finer texture. And I'm gonna paint over that before I add the aged metal look. I should have probably videotaped the process of gluing that stuff down, but I just was in the mode. I probably put a little too much paint on here, but there's still a few gaps where I missed paint underneath, so I'm kind of doing both at the same time. And the thing that bugged me that I ended up adding more detailed, like finer texture, was I really just did not like this angel. It just is too kiddish for what I usually do. So I'm trying to like fill in some of the weird, like the writing that's on there and this silly smiley face. Hopefully this will be enough to make it work for me in my mind and it won't bug me as much anymore. I kind of like putting this glitter, sparkly glass glitter over the top without painting over it. But if I'm gonna do that, I need to really make the black into aged metal first and then pour it over the top, because as soon as I start dry rubbing it, it's just gonna come off. So I'm going to put this black gesso over to secure it in place, and the texture will be picked up by that gold paint that we're gonna dry brush. All right, so once again, we're gonna let this sit and dry, and I'll be back to show you how it looks. Now that the paint is dry, I'm going to use a metallic paint to dry brush to age the fake metal. I have a dry brush that I'm going to dip in the paint and then brush across the paper bag to get just a little bit on the tips. We don't want too much paint or it'll just be a big golden glob. Then you're just lightly brushing across the top surface of all of our little doodads that are glued down. We're going to work our way up the jewels, just lightly brushing. The key to this is patience. You keep dabbing into the paint to get more, brush it off onto the bag, and then go back to dry brushing. It's tedious, it takes a while, but the result is absolutely beautiful. So can you see the difference here? We have some highlights now. Now we're going to make sure that we do both sides pretty thoroughly. You might have to let it dry for a little bit and come back just so you don't overwork an area and pull all of the black paint off. But you can start to see how this is taking shape. It's really highlighting all of the areas where the metal would be rubbed clear and making it look aged in the areas that things wouldn't rub against the metal. My covers are ready to assemble. I have the tarnished metal look here, and then the inside is a map that's like fantasy based, so I want to stick with that kind of vibe. I did pick out some paper. It comes from the Park Lane brand, and it's a foil one. There's a lot of very pretty metal accented papers in here. So I went with a gold-ish that matches that color scheme. I'm going to cut it to fit the cover. I'll move these out of the way for now. I'm making a binding that's 8.5 wide, or excuse me, long, to go along the binding. And I want to make sure it's wide enough that I can really bulk up my pages. So if we say at least a 2-inch center and at least 1 inch over the lip of the front and the back cover. So maybe I'll go, is 3 inches too wide? Yeah, let's see, how do I want to do this? I'm going to go for 1.5 inches on each side and 3 inches in the center. I've cut the binding 8.5 by 6 inches, and I'm going to put some creases in. So I'm going to change this out and turn it into a scoring board. And try not to touch that blade. Okay, so I'm going to flip it inside out, and I'm going to score it. I want it to be 1.5 inches on each side for going over the covers. So that gives us 3 inches in the center. So once we add the covers in, you can see there's a pretty big gap there, which gives us the ability to put 3 signatures in and bulk them up a little bit with an overlap that's still significant enough to really give it some structure. And actually that looks pretty nice together. This cardstock is a little thicker, so the edges are more likely to start to crack from the fold, so we probably will have to put something on there to support that after it's all glued together. But we'll also have something on the inside that will help too. So a lot of times I'll use lace to add that extra support on the corners. And it's really going to go on like this. But I'm going to do one side at a time so that I can really line it up. So we're going to kind of do it in reverse here. So I'm going to put the glue down and then set the cover on top. Now this is pretty thick paper, so I can be pretty generous. with glue. I'm still going to try to blend it towards the edge so it doesn't like squirt out as I set it together. And then I'm going to line this up as best I can, making sure my cut isn't perfect on the edge here, so I do have to be mindful of that. But now I'm going to put glue on the other side. And it doesn't matter if this doesn't look perfect as long as it folds correctly, because we're going to put an inside cover on there as well. But we'll stitch the signatures onto it first, so it'll be an easy assembly. I think I'm going to add an extra layer of cardstock to the inside of the binding to make sure that it has some strong support. Hopefully I don't break any of the jewels off with moving this around. Okay, we have our basic outside of the binding. That's the very beginning of the structure. Now, if we can make it stronger by putting a piece of cardboard or cardstock the shape of this part of the binding, and then we're going to glue in a full piece with the signatures attached, and that will bring the whole book together. I do need to do something to cover this because that will bug me. And also, let's see, we have, this is going to be the front cover, and we want to do some kind of flip here because that's the whole point. So I have some images to use for that, and I want to do that before I put any more of the binding on. I have these great flip images that I have wanted to use, and they make a great easy flip style. Now you can do these with photos, you just have to get the photos to line up properly, which can be difficult, but at the same time, many of the old vintage photos, the poses were exactly the same all the time, so it's not as complicated as you'd think. I might have went over a little far with this, but I think it will still work. So we'll do, say, 3 images for each flip. Or we need him. And then we're going to punch holes so that it can flip, and they'll go over the top of this stuff. So that will be a big part of the front of it. And then we can finish assembling the book. Now to do this, to assemble it, you're going to need a hole punch. And I use this big monstrosity. If you don't have something like this and you just have a smaller hole punch, wait to glue this binding on until after you've added in your flips. I get used to using this type, so I forget that the rest of the world doesn't own things like that. I at one point saw somebody using this at a actual scrapbooking class, and I immediately went on the hunt for one because it made life so much easier. It's called a memory keeper crocodile. Okay, so we're going to set this aside. We just need to start off with one card as our master card to punch out where we want the holes to be. Now I could measure it with anything you have to measure with, try to evenly distribute the holes on it. I need a marker of some form. So this is I'm gonna center it because that's easier for me. And I'm gonna put the holes an inch apart. Once I do one card, I'm gonna use that card to line up all the rest of them to make my life easy. This can be a little bit hard to see what you're doing. There are smaller versions of the same thing. There are many different types of hole punches that you can use. Because this bigger one can be used for everything, I'm just going to stick with the bigger one. I'll try to do this so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to line up the dots that I put on there with the hole punch, which is a little harder to see with this kind of a huge one, but it does get you further into the page than other hole punches would. It's a little awkward to use, but so once I've done one, then I can mark off all the rest of them fairly easily. I'm actually going to take the poodle. I'm going to try to put together some specific guys. That's the police officer. That's a tightrope walker. I like the snake charmer. There's a kangaroo. There's the rest of that guy. Oh, there's a seal. So here's our snake charmer. I think there's a girl in here. I just gotta find her. There's her legs. It might not have all of the pieces because this is a used game I picked up. Here's the rest of the snake charmer. So there we have two people. Oh, and there she is. So we'll do that and set them aside. Okay. So I'm going to punch these. And then I'm going to take this cover and decide where I want them to line up, keeping in mind that they're going to overhang over my... I'm going to bring them close to the edge, but not all the way, because I actually have to have two holes to make it swing. So we have to have enough room for those two holes. And I have to kind of think of how it's gonna hit. So our first hole will be all the way on the edge, but they'll actually hang over a little more than that. So do I want it to be in the center, or do I want it to be at the bottom of the page? I guess I want it to be in the center as much as I can. So once I set one up, or once I put one set of holes, then the rest are gonna have to line up with it. So I want to make sure I get the first one right. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to put punch holes and then I will be right back because you don't want to watch that boring process. I've punched double holes along the front cover, and I've punched holes in each of my flips, and I'm going to use a ribbon going from one side of the hole to the other to tie this down so that it will flip on that ribbon. Now, to get a ribbon small enough with what I have this thicker ribbon that I'm going to cut into smaller strands. So it's about 1/4 of the width of that ribbon. And I'm just cutting it down, which makes for a very rough looking ribbon. You can't really tear it because it will just shred. So it just requires a lot of patience. And I'm going to need 6 strands. I'm going to tie them on the front. Let me go a little bit further. I'm going to tie them on the front so that it's flat on the inside, so when I put the binding on, it won't bubble up. Alright, so I'm basically just going to cut this into thirds here to get my 6 strands. You can sit and measure it out so they're all even, but this is just the method to my madness. Now, to get them to lace easily, I can cut that at a point, and then it will go more easily into the hole. I'm going to go from behind, push it through, and then take my feet here. I've got them all mixed up now because I was punching holes. So I'm going to take my feet. I'm going to lace this one. And I guess I need to cut the edge of this too. I could have done that a little differently, but that's okay. So when I lace it, I want to try to keep it flat on the inside and tie the bow on the upper part. I could put eyelets in it. I put eyelets on the last one that I did, but what I found was that it didn't lay very flat when I added the eyelets. So this time around, I'm just going to do the bow. And actually, I might end up doing just knots. Actually, I think I am going to just do knots because I don't want it to be too bulky. Then I can cut these edges off after I get a good feel for how much space I need, or like how loose I need it to be able to flip it. So we'll cut all of these edges to a point. I'll do a couple more on camera and then skip ahead so you don't have to stare at me doing this. So I want to tie it at the top, so I'm going from behind and pulling it through. Try to make sure that that's laying flat on the bottom and tie it into a knot. You don't want to tie it ridiculously tight because you need it to be able to flip. If you do a square knot, it's less likely to come loose. I did not do a square knot because I usually end up adjusting it 17 times until it's the tightness that I want it to be. So a quick way to do this would be to pull the laces through for multiple at a time. If you're feeling like you want to organize a little bit more than I do. You could sit and do all 6 of them like this and then add the cards later. Believe it or not, these covers are very heavy, so it's awkward to do this. There's just a lot of bulk on the edges there. So if I put them down, or if I pull them all through first, then I can just tie them both, like lace through both holes on the cards and tie them at the same time. There's no right way, just whatever way gets the job done. And this is also why I don't worry too much about whether those holes are perfect, because they're covered. You're gonna have so much bulk on them in the front, and then on the back we're gonna put paper over them, so you don't have to be a perfectionist about laying out your holes as long as they're evenly spaced so that the cards fall flat, because you want them to be able to flip down and not overlap each other when people play with them. Then when you get done, you're going to cut these down, and this just depends on how you want them to fall. I usually cut them at an angle just for the sake of making them look interesting, but you can also like shred them up, make them look a little bit more worn. Sometimes the lace that you use to do it will kind of do that for you. I almost always use portions of lace just because they have a rougher look to them than if you use a whole thin lace. I've got my little poodle tie in. Now I need to cut an insert for this part of the binder right here, or binding, excuse me, to make sure that it has that extra support. I'm going to cut this to 8.5 inches long and a little bit less than 3 inches wide, just so it fits nicely with what's already there. So we're going to cut just a smidge less than 3 inches, because right now the binding space that's in there is exactly 3 inches, so we need it to tuck nicely right in this space without it overlapping. So I'm going to glue it in there, and it's just going to give it added strength, so when we put the bigger piece in, it's like 3 pieces of cardstock instead of just 2. And you could use regular cardboard. You could use fabric if you really wanted to. You could use the cardboard from like a box of cereal. It'd be a little bit thicker than this, but it wouldn't have the corrugation. I think corrugated cardboard would make it a little bit awkward, and you'd have to try to find a way to cover it, so I'd avoid that. So we're just looking to put that right in the center. Try to leave a white band around it. When we put the next piece inside, it's going to have to match these folds and still be able to fold. So you want to leave a little gap there where we're going to put a crease. Alright, so we've got our extra support, we've got our front done. It's going to look a bit like this. Now we just need to work on the actual bound pages. Let's see. We could use a red. Let's try this one. Alright, so I'm going to go. I need 8.5 by 6. And then I'm going to crease it at, I'm going to go 1.5 and then add 1/8. Go 1.5 from this side and add 1/8. And that gives me my inside fold. This is a thinner cardstock than what I used on the outside, so hopefully it won't buckle on me. So when this gets glued in, it should fold like this without cracking. I don't necessarily love the plain red, so let's see if we can age it a little bit before we do anything else. Since we have some yellows and such, I have this Distress Oxide. That's a spray that can change the color a little bit, and then you can add water and it further changes. You can add a little bit of orange. I also have alcohol ink, which if we mix these together can make for some interesting looks to them. I love playing with different inks, but I don't do it very often. I think I'm going to, oh, look at the back of it. That alcohol ink really wants to soak through. I think that sufficiently ages it, makes it not look quite as raw and new. I'm going to try to get the corners because I don't want the corners to be all perfect. Now this is also going to have stuff stitched to it, so we're going to let it dry, and then I'm going to stitch some signatures in and we'll glue it in place, and then you can see the finished product. I've stitched in 3 signatures and I'm getting ready to glue it into the book. It's not going to totally cover this, so we'll have to put something over that part of it, or else it will just bug me. So you can see the stitching is exposed here. I'm going to put glue down on this, the back portion of it, push that in, and then we'll glue down the sides. And that just makes it easier to really get it into that fold. I'm just using Fabri-Tac. You could use glitter glue if you're doing paper on paper. I feel like Fabri-Tac is a better hold. You could also use E6000 if you want to be patient and wait for it to dry. I rarely use the E6000 anymore. So I definitely don't have the kind of patience you need to make that stuff your friend. It definitely has a better hold though. So I'm rubbing this down to make it as flat as possible. I don't want it to be all lumpy. And then I'm going to put it down into the fold and line it up with the edge, top and bottom. I'm going to pick the sides up to make sure that it really fits. And then I'm going to push down into the crease, because that's the most important piece, that we want it to be able to move with the book covers. So getting it down into those cracks, folding it up, making sure it still moves. I'm kind of pushing down on the signature pages to help in the areas that I can't really smooth with my hand. I can get in between the signatures. And see, because we put that ink on the paper, in between the signatures looks pretty cool. It's not boring. All right, now I'm going to do my edge. I'm going to make sure to put extra in the crack, and then get the whole edge of this flap. And I like to have more in the crack of the spine because it does take the most abuse. Now hopefully this will still fold enough. It'll look the way I want it to. Pull lot of times I use fabric for this because it's more flexible. Kind of push that crease in without breaking the paper. Now I'm going to do the other side. Okay, so we have our book. Here's some pages. They're just some basic pages with some tucks. Oh, this one came a little bit loose. Oops. So we could sit and put some different tucks in if we wanted. These are unfinished tucks, but you can see how they'd fit in there. A little wide to go in that way. A lot of my pre-made tucks are long, so they don't necessarily fit, but could put them in there. This one folds out, so there's room to write. There's another tuck spot for whatever random piece of art you want to stick in there. Lots of writing space. So if I was finishing this book for somebody, I would add on these pages where there's just writing, I might put like some writing space, some kind of like vintage paper or something that gives the ability to write on it. This is a belly band, so something can be tucked underneath. And that's the end of the book. Now we need to put something here to finish this off. I have a bunch of these types of cutouts that could potentially work. This is baby. Well, here's some circus elephants. It kind of works. The elephant could, like this elephant here, kind of, I don't know if you can see that, but this elephant right here kind of goes with that same style. I have some leftover papers from earlier. So I could do something, putting another layer on there, or I could cut out some type of like pocket. I have this. I could do a pocket there. Try to make it the same size as this. Or we could do a multiple pocket type thing. I'm going to free cut this. One thing about having a pattern on your paper is it does make it easier to just free cut if you want to. So if we have some layers here, so if I want to make multiple tucks, I can just layer slats and glue the edges down and leave this part open. So if I wanted to put multiple, I only need to glue down the bottom of whatever the top, whatever this top image is. Okay. I'm trying to make it a little different than the other side, so it won't be a problem if it's not completely symmetrical. Now obviously this would be way straighter if I used some kind of paper cutter. Okay, so I could do it this way, or I could do it more narrow so that I'm only covering the center part, and make multiple. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to cut this in half. Not quite the same, so I'm going to trim them. Like, you could sit and measure them, but it just takes longer. And a lot of things can be done without fancy paper cutters. So if I do this, then I can start up here, make multiple pockets, as long as I line them up. I just want to make sure I fully cover that white piece. Okay. Put glue just on the sides, not on the bottom. I mean, you could do the bottom if you just want a short tuck, but I'm going to do it so that the tuck gets longer and longer. So I'm going to put this one close to the top, try to center it as much as I can. Then overlap and do the same thing. Put a glue on the edges. And I'm just overlapping a little bit. And I'll do it again. And at any point you could glue the bottom if you wanted to short it a little bit, but I'm just overlapping a little bit. And the bottom one we're going to do three sides so that the bottom is closed off. This will be our shortest tuck. And make sure I cover that white thing that bugs me, so I don't forget my purpose here. So now we'll give that a second to dry, and then I'll show you how we can use it. You could do more elaborate decorations. You could cut little notches into these if you wanted. So I have layers of multiple tucks in one spot. And it looks pretty cool when you start adding the things in there. And that's the reason why I like to have the wide binding, because the more of these details you add, the more it fills in that space. And before you know it, the book's going to be filled and straight. That way you don't get that sort of fan experience where it won't shut. Now I'm going to fix the glue on this because it's popping off. And I think also I want to put some lace over this because it is not as secure as I would like, because look at them. The cardstock started to tear on the corners, so having some kind of lace over it will help cover where it is fraying, but also provide more support so it doesn't totally break. I mean, we have the supports on the inside. So I'm gonna line this up so that it covers that edge, but will still go over this corner. Give it a second to dry here. And I can just put polka dots of glue on the lace here to secure this part. and just fold it over that edge. Try not to squish the glue everywhere. So now I have extra support on that hinge. This one's going to be harder because I have these ties I have to avoid. So I'm going to use something a little bit thinner. That could work if I could get a small enough piece. So this could cover that corner. How would it look over here? Not too bad. At least I'm not trying to match it. I think I should do this edge first to make sure I work around these bows. This is a very thin material too, so I'm going to rub this down. Make sure I don't have big gobs that are going to make the fabric look wet. Just trying to get the very edge on there. This could have been easier if I had done this before I popped all the holes in, because I could have just popped the holes into the material also. I'm going to glue this edge down, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the glue down, then I'm going to rub it down flat so it's not too liquidy in any one spot, because it will show up as like a water stain type thing on this type of material. And I'm going to fold it down. I might not have went all the way to the edge. Alright, so now we have more security on that binding. I could add some more decoration there. Could add a green pom-pom that kind of goes with the little doggy. That could be fun. I'm just going to do a line. I do have smaller bottles for glue, which tends to be less gloppy. But now I could put some kind of decoration on the binding too, which would be fun. These are great little fussy cut ephemera. I have no idea where they came from. My sister picked them up for me. She has a great eye for this stuff. Okay, so we could put him right in here, and it kind of gives it, I guess I kind of like him on the bottom. Kind of draws all the colors together too, since I do have a hodgepodge mix of brighter colors on this one. I'm going to try to go under the pom-poms and overlap the black. Oh, he's so cute. I did go a little lower than I meant to, but that's okay. Alright, so we have our circus slash vintage concoction of a book with various tucks, and then you can keep adding to it. Well, thanks for joining me. I hope that your creations turned out amazing, and hopefully I will see you again.